There's no question at all that the Dexter season finale was just a mess. It left the audience with more questions than answers. So 8 years later, there was a spin-off to Dexter that attempted to answer a lot of these questions. Let's discuss that show. Consider this your formal spoiler warning. We are talking about everything that happens up until this point that we're at right now in Dexter. So if you don't want to know, if you're watching the show, come back and watch the video later. So this show is set 8 years after Dexter fakes his death. The first episode spends most of its runtime explaining to the audience what Dexter has been up to. We see he has not harmed anyone in this time. He's become a humble farmer and he's a little too happy. Basically, everything has worked out for him. And I have to be honest, this is a terrible first impression to give the audience. From the start, Dexter is just very dislikable in this spin-off. They strip away a lot of his likable qualities from this show. Not to mention, he's a worse father than Drake. It also doesn't make much or any sense at all to me as to why he can control his dark passenger. I understand this is out of respect for Deborah, who died in the Dexter finale, but we have established that Dexter has urges he can't control, whether this is from trauma or just the way his brain is. He also sees Deborah the way he saw his dad, but the way this is done is different. We get scenes where they physically interact. She comforts him in bed, she puts her fingers in his mouth. It's all a bit grim, to be honest, especially considering this is his sister. With his dad, he had a calming, rational presence that would question him whenever he drifted away from the code. Deborah, on the other hand, it just doesn't really feel like her. Every single scene she is in is so intense, it's just too much. And she is shouting in every single scene she has. I just want Dexter to take some medication because he has some problems. He has some schizophrenia. Like, it's unquestionable at this point. They also have these shitty graphic titles at the beginning of every episode, blatantly stealing from Scott Pilgrim, who did it much better. And they actually did it for a reason, because that's what it looks like in the graphic novels. Here, it just looks a bit cheap and fits awkwardly into the starting scenes of the show. Anyway, I want to talk about each episode briefly and go through a bit of a synopsis just to remind you if you haven't seen it in a while. If you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to subscribe, leave a like. If you enjoyed the video at any point, please do that and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I'd really appreciate that. I love the interaction I get here, so thank you for that. We already touched on the season opener. We get introduced to Dexter's new life as Jim Lindsay. We see he has his own farm and land. He has a new job as a gun shop keeper and a new girlfriend who happens to be a sheriff. It's not Deborah though. There are no similarities at all there. Her name's Angela, by the way. The plot kicks off when Dexter is pressured to sell his gun to a young man called Matt Caldwell, who is pretty clearly a knob. Dexter asks a few questions, find out he fits Harry's code, and in an altercation at the end of the episode, Matt kills a deer illegally on reservation land. This makes Dexter lose control and kill him, snapping back into his old ways. Now, I do have a bit of a problem with this. I don't think Matt should have been written to have fit the code. In my opinion, it's just a bit too convenient, and it gives Dexter a bit of an easy way back into killing someone. I would rather that the built-up stress of the last 10 years, the lack of self-control Dexter would have at this point, be the reason he does it. But look, people are going to say I'm nitpicking, and even if they did that, people probably would have criticised that. I just think it's a bit convenient sometimes when people like this fit the code. It feels like they've just written it in, which, I mean, look, they have, but it just feels a little convenient. Harrison also makes an appearance in this episode. I think the scene is performed really well. You can cut the tension with a knife. This scene is so awkward in such a beautiful way. Dexter turns Harrison away, pretending to be Jim, and Harrison sees right through this. It's almost comical how Dexter tries to get away with this, but he is urged by the thought of Deborah and how he got her killed. Eventually, Harrison gives up and walks away. This is my favourite scene in the show, and probably my favourite episode. I do like episode 1. Episode 2 and 3 blend into each other a bit. They both focus on the investigation into Matt Caldwell's death, which of course Dex is responsible for. Dexter's girlfriend, Angela, obviously has a lot of questions regarding Harrison. Harrison also has a lot of questions for Dexter, but Dexter pretty much refuses to talk to his son, it really frustrates me throughout the whole show, to be honest. Like, I know Dex lacks empathy, but does he not expect his son to have any questions? I mean, Darth Vader was a better dad. At least he told Luke the truth of who he was. We also get introduced to the main villain this season, Kurt Caldwell, who is also Mr. Krabs. Sorry, that's just a really fun fact my girlfriend told me. And I love the fact that he is Mr. Krabs. That's so niche. Kurt is the father of Matt, so we see him lead the search with the police. He is also this super rich truck stop owner and takes an interest in girls running away from home. He also likes money. You have to put that in there, come on. The investigation is brought to an end when Kurt claims he received a FaceTime call from Matt. Angela is skeptical of this, and Dexter is definitely skeptical as he knows Matt is dead, thus unable to use FaceTime. Big wrinkly brain man. The next 2 episodes are a little more focused on Harrison. There is a school shooting, I guess because this is America. Harrison stabs the school shooter and is deemed a hero, except he doesn't. He orchestrates the whole thing so he can stab someone. Honestly, I'm surprised this isn't fan fiction. I don't know how people like this show. Dexter is suspicious of this, and his worries are only confirmed when Harrison violently breaks his opponent's arm in a wrestling match. Dexter has a funny reaction, a bit like when he hits Paul with the pan. Goated moment, by the way. Harrison feels more rejected, and this only drives a larger wedge between Dexter and his son. Harrison becomes closer to Kurt at this time because Kurt actually puts effort in, unlike his dad. Dexter commits a few more murders, and Angela bumps into Angel. Look, I'd prefer Masuka, but you take what you can get. She asks him for advice on missing people, and he sort of randomly brings up Deborah. He comments on the tragedy of her death as well as Dexter's. Then he says he left her behind a son called Harrison. I think, again, this is just too convenient. They could have written a more interesting way for her to find out, maybe where she uses her detective skills, for Angel to just randomly blurt out that Dexter had a son called Harrison, and obviously the missing son make her realise. It's a little goofy. Anyway, in episode 7 they find DNA evidence that incriminates Kurt in several murders. They lock him up, but he says it's his dad's DNA. Now look, I think this is ridiculous. We're not talking about stealing candy from your local store. We're talking about murdering and abducting women over a course of 2 or 3 decades. You can't just blame your dad's DNA and move on. There would surely be a bigger trial. Anyway, plot convenience, I guess. Dexter visited Kurt while he was in prison, and Kurt tells him something important. Titanium doesn't melt. See, Dexter melted Matt's body in a furnace, but he had titanium screws from a surgery, so this ends up being evidence of Dexter's guilt. Another plot hole I just thought of is I don't know how they attach those screws to Dexter. It's not like he left thumbprints on them, but maybe they can reverse engineer some DNA or something. I don't know how it works. Maybe a plot hole, maybe not. I don't know. It's quite a cool quote that titanium doesn't melt, although it probably does, just at a very high temperature. We're into the final 3 episodes of the season now, and honestly, not much has happened. We had a few investigations ongoing, and the show isn't terrible, but Dexter really needs to have a chat with his son because, my god, it is frustrating. Like, I know he can't just come out as a serial killer to his son, but at least give him some explanation as to why you abandoned him and sent him to Argentina so you could live a double life. It's just, yeah. Dexter gets taken hostage by one of Mr. Krabs' goons. He escapes. Again, people like this show. At the same time, Kurt is grooming Harrison and takes him home so he can slaughter him in front of Dexter. This obviously doesn't work. Harrison's even more confused now, so Dexter has to be honest with him, which brings us to episode 9. Yes, episode 9, and we finally get Dexter to speak to his son. Let's go. He tells Harrison about a clown he killed called the Joker. I think they call him Tickles or something, but this is so clearly a Joker ripoff. This kind of inspires Harrison, and together they work to kill Kurt. So that's the end of Mr. Krabs. Kurt has an ace in the hole though, and leaves evidence for Angela. She arrests Dexter in the finale and has him banged to rights. She even calls Angel for backup. Now technically she doesn't have any evidence that he is the Bay Harbor Butcher, but seems likely, seems positive. And she clearly knows she's Dexter Morgan, so there's a lot to explain there. I'm sure Angel would have a lot of questions. There are a series of interviews, and Dexter is screwed. Titanium screwed. He is to be extradited back to Miami and given the death penalty. Backed into a corner, Dexter gives Angela the location of Kurt's victims. She leaves, even though she could just wait till the morning, surely. I know this is her life's work, as they say, but It's clearly a trap. Dexter kills the other cop, Logan, who just does not fit the code, and escapes. He meets Harrison, who sees Dexter for what he is now. He killed Logan. The code is noble at its core, but Dexter doesn't necessarily follow it, and it's just covering up for the fact that Dexter is evil. Dexter's a bad person. He's a killer. He's killed so many people and he's ruined a lot of lives. He's not a hero of any sort. So Dexter comes to the realization that he's not a good influence on Harrison. Who would have guessed? And he allows Harrison to shoot him fatally. Or so we think. The showrunner actually told us at the time that this was a fatal shot and that he wouldn't pretend to kill Dexter. He respects the fans too much. So that's how much he respects you. No, I'm not blaming the showrunner here. I don't think it's him. I think there's just too much money involved. But like, he's dead. He gets shot in the heart. We see him dead. He's been there at least 5 minutes. They can say it's cold. How cold has it got to be? I don't know. By the way, side note, the ending here where Harrison's driving off, they're copying Breaking Bad. They just are. So Dexter is supposedly alive. They've got a new spin-off coming up called Dexter Resurrection. This will be based immediately after the events of this show, according to Michael C. Hall. What do I think will happen? There's two options. One, they're going to follow Harrison, and Dexter's going to be a father figure to him in the way that Harry was to Dexter, a vision of sorts. Now, would this make sense? No. Would this be stupid? Yes. I don't think I want this to happen. I don't think anyone would really watch it, so I don't think they're going to go with that. The second option, and the likely one I think they're going to go with, is that Dexter is going to come back to life. Now, how are they going to work around this? He's been shot in the heart and he's lost a lot of blood. Even if he's not been shot in the heart, the amount of blood he's lost, the amount of time we know he's spent there already, he would be dead. You could maybe argue that because it's a fictional tale that they're going to find a way to keep him alive. I guess that is what they're going to do. It will be stupid, but I think Angela's going to keep him alive somehow. He's going to be sent to a hospital. He's either going to escape the hospital, or what would be interesting if the show is around his trial and we get to see more of Dexter's trial. But that won't be it. He'll escape somehow and they'll make a multi-season show off it somehow. And Michael C. Hall will be playing Dexter for the rest of his life. Anyway, New Blood. People like the show. I liked it nearly. It's a 6 or a 7 out of 10 for me. It's not terrible, but it's not great. The plot at times could be a lot better, I think. There's a lot of convenience written into it, which happens in the later seasons of Dexter as well. I just think they could have gone in a different direction. But let's see if they do that in Resurrection. Anyway, if you liked the video, please leave a like. Please subscribe as well. Feel free to leave a comment. I really appreciate any support I get on these videos. My last one did really well. If this one does as well, that would be great. I'd really appreciate that. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments.